functionally retarded. I think it means that there's a serious problem, and I'm in trouble. And I'm in trouble because our next guest really classes up the show.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Elegant guest. And a lot of our fans have been asking for him to be on. Let me just give him his intro, because a lot of people complain if we don't give them the intro, but everyone already knows who he is. They've been all at Twitter. See what I did there?
Oh.
All right. He is a representative from Texas' 2nd Congressional District. I wouldn't have gotten the number right otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
I just know he's a representative. But more importantly, more interestingly, former Navy SEAL officer who earned 2 Bronze Star medals, Purple Heart, went to Harvard after military service, and a lot of people know, he lost his right eye serving in Afghanistan
Certified
due to an IED. You can follow him on the Twitter at Rep. Dan Crenshaw. Representative Crenshaw, thank you for being here. Sorry, Tycoon Crenshaw, you told me before the break.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. This is awesome to be with you.
I am very glad to have you here. And just to get the discomfort right out of the way, and I'm going to be hypocritical, how annoying is it that everyone always asks you about your eye patch first, knowing that I just did that?
Oh, well, no one's as annoying as you, I guess.
Oh, jeez. I really? And Pete Davidson threw you a few jabs, and I topped the list. I feel horrible about myself.
No, you're great. I'm a big fan. No, I don't mind. It's part of my story, and frankly, being in politics is telling your story,
right?
Because you do have to connect with people in order to get them to believe that you should represent them. There has to be some kind of human connection, and sharing part of yourself with them is a big part of that. So I surely expect it.
Right. Well, I appreciate how level-headed you are. I want to get to that as it relates to Trump a little bit. But since we led with that, Pete Davidson obviously got in trouble for mentioning your eye patch on Saturday Night Live. And I remember a lot of conservatives were outraged, saying he needed to be fired. Then you appeared with him and buried the hatchet pretty quickly. That's not typical. And we're held to that same standard as a comedy show, where often I say, listen, I don't think you want to take everything that we say 100% seriously. What inspired that? Because that is counterculture to the outrage society in D.C., both on the right and left.
Yeah, and it's something we got to fix in this country because it's out of control.
Yeah.
Of course, going back in time a little bit, just so everybody understands, there was certain elements of his joke that were like, they were kind of funny, but kind of offensive. But first he said that I looked like a hitman in a porno, and I was like, okay. I'm curious at what kind of films you're watching, Pete, but I wasn't like, is this a genre? Like, it just brought up.
I think he just went down Avenatti's client list and just searched those.
So, but that wasn't the part that got everybody riled up. It was the part after that. Maybe he misspoke. Maybe it was scripted, funny. Who knows? But he just said, "I know he lost his eye in war or whatever." Right? It was dismissive. That's what made everybody angry. So I woke up the next day, and to a bunch of texts from friends, and noting that this had happened, and we kind of watched the media outrage sort of play out. There was a lot of outrage for it, and I was expected to make a comment on it, and I can't fake outrage.
Right.
I'm not good at that. We have very dark senses of humor in the SEAL teams.
True, yeah.
Examples of that. So we're pretty used to having thick skin, and so I have to admit I was not. It did not take some kind of emotional toll on me. The frustration with it was the fact that I had to deal with it at all. So I just kind of said what I felt, which is like, listen, don't try hard not to offend people, but also try hard not to be offended. I think that's a good way to live in this world. And just because our society at this moment tends to value and I would say elevate this sort of victimhood mentality and elevate this aggrieved victim status, it's like, oh man, if I can just be an aggrieved victim, then I'll really be right. Then I'll win. That's kind of a terrible place for our culture to be.
Right.
And I don't want to be part of that. And so there was no reason to demand apologies for any of this nonsense.
Right. That's a good point, though. That's a really good point. Not a lot of politicians, we make that point on this show, but yeah, the seeking affliction, as you see with people out there. And people say, well, why would anyone want to be in this? And then insert minority class of the day here. I go, well, I don't know, because you could get off faking hate crimes, for starters.
Exactly.
I mean, but rich Hollywood. So it's across the board at that point. Let me kind of moving on from that. Let me ask you this. How have you become, I mean, obviously as a freshman representative, and we use that term a lot, but so popular, despite being one of, I would say, the few balanced viewpoints out there, if people follow your social media, on President Donald Trump. A lot of people are seen as either never Trump or they're seen as MAGA hat wearing. It doesn't matter what he does. You praise him where he's right, and you called him out. You criticized him when he was talking about John McCain recently, and criticizing him and lobbing some attacks after he had died. How do you remain so popular? Because there aren't many people who seem to figure out that equation.
Well, I mean, we haven't done a poll. I don't know that I'm so popular.
I can tell you with our viewers and our readers. Yeah, they love you.
Oh, yeah.
I hope so. Because I think people respect intellectual consistency and honesty. They just want you to tell you why you're saying what you're saying. Mm-hmm. They don't want to feel like it's just part of a political calculation. And so the way to avoid it looking like it's part of a political calculation is for it not to be a political calculation and for it to actually be true. Right. Okay. And listen, I don't take swipes at the president just to do it. Okay. A lot of never-Trumpers just do that. Right. I think they do it just because it's become part of their brand and they just can't help themselves, and they forget to defend conservatism. So that's a real problem, because a lot of what President Trump does is conservative. A lot of the way he governs is conservative, and it's good. Mm-hmm. There's some things I disagree with. It should be really simple to simply say, well, I disagree with those things. I'm not a sycophant. I'm not just following blindly. Yeah. So,
well, you know what? That segues into an interesting point. First off, I love that Beto O'Rourke had to respond to your tweet in an interview with was it Chris Hayes? I don't know.
Hayes actually called him out on that, which was interesting.
Yeah, Chris Hayes. I was still, by the way, if anyone could explain the Brian Stelter thing to me, please let me know. I still don't get it. We just talked about that a couple. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I love that he was forced to respond because of your social media. But let me ask you this: you've also held a position on the border crisis, right? And a lot of people have talked about the constitutionality of that and the state of emergency. You were just explaining this to me during the brief break. What is your stance, and how do you justify it as a consistent conservative? Because I mean, it may surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, I've got a series of things I want to point out to my conservative colleagues who I think rightfully have concerns over it. Okay, so there's a couple arguments, right? One is that it's not an emergency. Okay, well, the counter argument to that is, well, yes, it is an emergency, and the numbers dictate that it is. Okay, last month there was, 66,000 apprehensions. Depending on how you measure that, almost 80,000 just last month. Yeah. Yesterday it was reported that we're going to have the highest amount of daily illegal crossings in 13 years. The other reason it's an emergency, and a humanitarian emergency at that, is because our system is designed to encourage immigrants to drag children across, because they know if they bring a child across, they get let go into the population. We have a whole new generation of dreamers being created because of that. And that constitutes a crisis. All right. There's more family units being apprehended than ever before. So that's a problem. Is it an emergency? Yes. Is it different than it was even a year ago? Yes, absolutely. There is a different situation. Okay. So that's that part. Then there's the constitutionality of it. Now there's two elements of the Constitution that I believe butt up against each other here, and you pretty much have to decide which one you value more. Mm-hmm. On this side, you have the appropriations part. Okay, that's Article 1, right? Congress is in charge of appropriating money. You can't just change that. Now, technically, the president is reprogramming money. He's not taking it out of the Treasury like the Constitution says you can't do. But that's just that's a technicality. Mm-hmm. There's the other part of it, though, which says that the president needs to faithfully execute the law. That's Article 2. Well, what law are we talking about? Well, how about U.S. Code 1325? Which is
this how popular you are? Is this your computer letting you know that everyone's texting you right now? All right.
Yeah, it's good. I wish I could make that. If I mute that, I wonder if I mute you. That's the problem.
That's okay. We'll deal with it because we love because you're so cuddly.
Sorry.
And you were talking about, so yes, you were going to the president after you got into the constitutionality, Article 1, and now we're going to you're going over to the president and what kind of falls under his legitimate purview, I believe is where you headed.
Exactly. We want you to faithfully execute the law. And 1325 is a law. It says you cannot cross the border illegally. And so it's not being enforced right now. It's the president's job to enforce it. Mm-hmm. So, again, those two butt up against each other. I value that one. I value the one that says we have to protect our country over this other one, which is an appropriations law that was passed by Congress. So that, coupled with the National Emergencies Act itself, which clearly puts it in writing and statute to use that act in that way. Right. I think we've got a pretty good case.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And that actually would be one of the few areas where people could look at executive orders and say, as it relates to national security or national emergency, that's what the role of the president is effectively. It should be limited. But if it deals with national security, obviously that he's called the commander-in-chief for a reason. And I think it does come down to, I guess, the gray area of whether you consider the border crisis a national emergency. I think you've made a very strong case. And this brings me to something else here. There are a lot of similarities between you and go with me here. So don't take offense to it right away, because what I'm about to say is way worse than what Pete Davidson said, but I'm going to bring it all back home. some similarities here between Alexandria Ocasio, Nina Pinta Santa Maria Cortez, in that you are both new, fresh faces. Social media is a huge portion of your platform, very influential, both seen as firebrands. But I think there are some differences here which really sort of draw a significant line in the sand as to how the people conservatives embrace versus the left, in that, namely, you're articulate, pragmatic, not a doomsday theorist in the same way that Nina Pinta Santa Maria Cortez is, and you openly list references, sources. You know, when you were talking about the border crisis, you listed charts on Twitter. I had Cortez respond to me on Twitter and just say, well, look it up. Well, hold on a second. Why don't you show me? You made the claim. Have you heard these comparisons before? And do you see that as a good thing, something that you embrace?
I think, no, I was hoping you would just continue your list of compliments, but can't go on forever.
Yeah, the interview can't go on that long, but when we get off air, I can make sure I'll make you feel very comfortable. I'm married, by the way. People are going to take that the wrong way. I mean, I'll make you feel comfortable in coming back, because I
took it the wrong way.
Yeah, I took it the wrong way. I apologize. Hey, Ted Cruz came back.
Hey.
4 times.
No, I always take a slight amount of offense when people say that, but I do understand what people mean by it. It's a matter of media attention. We're both young. We're both millennials. We're both, I think, trying to drive a future for our party. I'm really happy with the future that me and my colleagues talk about for our party. I'm not so sure they have that same kind of unity over on that side. And listen, you brought up something, which is defend what you're saying,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're getting too comfortable in this culture with this idea of kind of bold ignorance, right? Where it's just like if you're emotional about it, if you're genuine, if you're authentic, then the facts don't matter, right?
Right.
And I think she's actually said that before in an interview. She said something along those lines.
Vox and Huffington Post said that even if Cortez, I believe it was either Vox, Huffington Post, it might have been Washington Post, so I don't know exactly, but we did a piece on it not that long ago where they said it doesn't matter if she hasn't ironed out all the details because she's morally right. She's fundamentally morally right. And for me, I go, well, how do you know that you're morally right? The facts should line up with how you feel. The facts should line up with how you're emoting. And if they don't at all, well, chances are you're probably morally incorrect. But they grant her, and especially the media. I know this sounds like a tired trope, but you deal with this all the time as a conservative. The media really does prop this up and assume the moral high ground to someone like AOC.
Yeah, well, they operate from a different premise. I mean, if you're, like, for instance, if you're looking at a Green New Deal and you're operating from a premise of the entire world ending in 12 years, well, then there's no cost is too much.
Right.
So they configure the data and their arguments in a way to assume that if you disagree with them, then you are morally corrupt. Right. And that's a real problem. It means you're not having an intellectual conversation. And
they accuse conservatives and Republicans of doing that with global terrorism. Like, oh, you're fear mongering. Well, hold on a second. I would say that there is reason for legitimate concern, and I would maybe defer to you since you've obviously served in our military. My injury only came from crashing a Jeep on the way to an AIDS walk, so not exactly the same thing. But global terrorism, more of a concern to me than the reality of the world ending in 12 years if we don't pass a 5-page bill. 5 pages. 5 pages.
Yeah. I mean, one is true, one is not. And, and more recently what they did that with was simply the border, right? There's no crisis, nothing to see here. I mean, we heard this over and over and over again, this mantra of a manufactured crisis. And, like, again, I can just lay out the numbers. When you have 400,000 people crossing illegally last year, these are just apprehended, by the way. Border Patrol thinks they maybe get 1 in 3. Yeah. That's an enormous number. I don't have to call them bad people. I don't have to say that there might be terrorists among them. And this is where our messaging gets screwed up, I think, as conservatives.
Sure.
Like, I don't have to call them all criminals, okay? I mean, technically they're conducting a criminal act by crossing the border illegally, but let's just assume that they're all good people, 100%.
Yeah.
It's still an unsustainable inflow of people, right? Because you come in here, we're putting these kids into our schools, they're using emergency rooms, there's a cost on society, and it's also impossible to integrate them into our society. And here's the second thing that conservatives don't say enough is you're cutting in front of the line in front of legal immigrants who deserve to be in this country, because we do want immigrants in this country. And we can have a valid conversation about whether we should up our quota of legal immigrants. But there really shouldn't be any discussion over whether we should have illegal immigrants coming into the country.
Well, that sounds about like something a white male millennial would say, but I'll let the audience make their own judgment here. I have to ask you about a couple more things. We do have to get going relatively soon. You just introduced a bill that would include family leave for millennials. You introduced it, I believe, on Wednesday.
Not just millennials, yeah.
Yes.
Paid family leave.
Can you explain that to people who may not understand it and where they can go to learn more about it?
Senator Rubio and Representative Ann Wagner have been working on this for quite a while now. Senator Romney was there at the press conference as well too, supporting this. So really proud to be a part of this. Basically, it's an understanding that, and I think this is an overarching theme that I want to point out sometimes. The left is not always wrong about the problems they point out and what they want. They're just almost always wrong about the solutions they propose.
Very good point.
So paid family leave is a pretty good example of that, right? Paid family leave, that's not a terrible thing in and of itself. I would love for new young parents to be able to have some kind of financial cushion if they're going to have their first baby, especially if they're in their 20s or 30s or even 40s. You're getting your start in life, all right? Millennials understand this. And it's important to point out the millennial generation, not because this bill is just for millennials, but because we could probably, as millennials, we could probably make the most use of it.
Right.
So the question is, how do you pay for something like this? Because the Democrat solution is, well, giant government program, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, completely unsustainable. The very people we're trying to help, we're going to indebt them to do it. Well, that's a terrible solution, not very creative, and pretty much pertains to most of the solutions they propose for just about every problem that they think is a problem. Okay, but let's assume this is a problem, because I think it is, and we're pro-family, right? I want the family unit to thrive. So what this allows is it allows you to borrow from your future Social Security funds. Basically, and I'll give you the simplest explanation of it. Basically, you take 3 months of family leave. Okay, now you have to back up your retirement by a similar amount of time to pay it back. Now you have other options to pay it back too. You can pay it back sooner if you'd like. You can pay it back in lengthier payments if you'd like. But it doesn't change the long-term budget. It doesn't change the long-term health of Social Security either. It does change how we formulate the short-term health, but not the long-term. And that's important. So we're basically, the way I put it, you're borrowing from someone richer than yourself, which is you in the future, because you've actually had time to make it in this world.
So it's like Time Cop with entitlements.
It's a really good way to put it. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. And also, I maybe a little bit of Demolition Man with entitlements. I'm not entirely sure. The whole Van Damme catalog, really.
That was an interesting movie at the time. Sylvester Stallone.
I know. Wait, was Demolition Man Stallone?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Snipes
That was Stallone.
Was Snipes in Time Cop?
Yeah.
No, Snipes was in.
No, they were both. Right?
I have no idea. I know Time Cop was Van Damme, but for some reason I'm thinking he was also in Demolition Man. I know Snipes. I think Snipes was in both. The point is, I don't want to muddy the waters on your brilliant proposal here with my stupid commentary. We do have to get going here. So, final thing. One thing I love. I have a tweet right here from you to Representative Adam Schiff, where you said that he said he had direct evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. And this is important because it's putting a fine point on it. He didn't say maybe there's a possibility. He said that he had direct evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. That means it's a lie.
And he's doubling down still,
right,
with those comments that he's made before. Yeah, so sorry.
This is important for people to maintain a timeline, and this is why, like you said, intellectual consistency is important, because we need to hold people to the same standard that they would hold out. And if you say, "Listen, we need to investigate someone for Russian collusion," Kalusia could be a country, could be a city in a country. I have no idea. Then we need to say, okay, by that same standard, if you've claimed that you have evidence, we might need to investigate you. So this is a springboard to say, what would you say is President Trump's biggest win of the week? Would it be the Mueller report? Would it be Avenatti? If you had to list them and rank them.
Man, it's been a pretty good week for the president. I think he's just kicking his feet up right now, and well deserved, because it really did all come down into like one moment where the Mueller report found that there was no collusion. Avenatti got arrested, which is a little disappointing for some of us who would have liked to see him jump into the presidential primary and along with every other Democrat, but he's not going to be part of that.
Too bad.
And just to watch all that take place. Happy for the president. I think it's a good win. His veto was not overridden either. So we should be seeing some money come into the come into wall funding, which I think we need, and I think they're going to send it to the right places. I think just west of El Paso is the last I heard on that. And I don't think that'll hurt our military readiness either, based on where I'm seeing that money kind of come from, or disaster preparedness. So these are all good things. The president's making good on his promises to actually secure our country. We have all found out that he indeed did not collude with Russia. I'd never really thought he did, but it looks like we now have a lengthy investigation that shows that he did not. And Democrats really need to accept that. The one thing I want to say about Adam Schiff is he used his position on the Intelligence Committee to make everybody believe that he had access to information that he really didn't.
Yes.
And that is extreme. That's beyond dishonest. It's one thing to just kind of say it, that politicians always do, but he abused his position, and that's really problematic.
Yeah, and sometimes President Trump can come across a little nutty, but I think that anyone would lose their marbles a little bit when people are out there claiming that you've done something that you haven't done. I think anyone would go a little bit nuts in the public eye, where they're going, hold on a second, you're trying to obstruct justice. What? Obstruct what? There's no crime. And they're afterwards like, well, there's no crime, but maybe obstruction? We don't know. And he's going, Schiff. That's how I feel. But I will say this, we have to get going, and I am tired, and you must be exhausted from all the witting. It's so much. I think people are getting tired. People can follow you at Rep Dan Crenshaw. Is there anywhere else that you would like to plug real quick?
Yeah, well, at Rep Dan Crenshaw, I got another Twitter account at Dan Crenshaw TX. We use them both. They're both great follows. Please follow both. Instagram, Dan Crenshaw TX, and just search for Dan Crenshaw in Congress and on Facebook.
Crenshaw, thank you so much for being here, sir. I appreciate it. We must go. We're going to wrap this up in a nice ribbon. We'll be back after this.